Hello. I wanted to do something about video games, but I wasn't exactly sure what to call it, so sorry for that lame title. So I am Daniel Marino. There are a lot of new faces this year, so hi. I'm an award-winning indie game designer. I am one half of Brad Dunbar Studios, an indie game shop. The other half of Brad Dunbar Studios is Brad Dunbar, and he is back there in the handsome blazer. I've made 2 video games, ever. And that makes me totally qualified to talk about this. The first game was the product manager game. Some of you might remember we did for Hacksgiving. I think it was 2 or 3 years ago. I did that with Brad and Barry, and also with some help from Sean and Kalina. Kalina helped with some copywriting on that, so thank you for that. So recently, Brad and I did a competition where we created a video game, an HTML5 video game, which uses primarily JavaScript, HTML, CSS, more simplistic languages, depending on your thoughts on that. And the limits were, it had to be 13 kilobytes in total after gzipped, and it couldn't use any online resources, so no Google fonts, no jQuery libraries, nothing like that. I have some notes here, and my phone's going dark. So I want to show you the game real quick before I talk about it. And I'm going to try to play it and talk at the same time, which could be extremely difficult. So you already got a little sample of the music. So it's a basic concept where you can platform by running and jumping. And you collect a star to go on to the next level. And the kind of like the key mechanic is by pressing space, you can toggle between layers. And you can tell there's a dark layer and there's a light layer. And if I toggle, I'm going to fall between the first layer and hit the second layer. And then you start getting into some tricky platforming, because if I just jump here, and I'm already dying because I'm talking at the same time, obviously I won't land, so I have to toggle midair. And so here, plot thickens, I can't get past this wall, so there's a couple ways I could beat this. The first way is I could just drop down here and then jump up and then collect the star, but that's kind of like the newbie way to do it. The cool way to do it is to toggle through the wall. That's like a speedrun strat. Oh. So this one catches you by surprise. You just keep dropping and dying, and you see I'm racking up deaths. So you gotta quickly toggle, and toggle. Toggle. Oh. I haven't played this in a while. So I'm not going to play too many more levels because there's 25, and this could be, this is fun for me, but probably not fun for you. This is one of the first level ideas I came up with. I originally came up with this concept about 2 years ago, and I knew I wanted to make it really cool, but I didn't have the skills to code it. At least I didn't feel like I did, and I didn't really want to spend the time learning crazy frameworks to do it. So we got a thicker wall here that we got to try to get through. All right, so I think I've showed you enough. So we'll just let him keep dying. Make sure I didn't forget any notes. So, like I said, I didn't feel like I had the skills to do this a couple years ago, and so when I found out about the JS13 competition, I said, "Hey, Brad, remember you and I made a game a few years ago? How would you like to do that again?" And he instantly said yes, no questions asked. I said, "Okay, well, there's a little caveat. We only have 13K to do it." And he's like, "All right, I'm in." So I told him about my concept, and he says, "That sounds really awesome. Let's do it." And so there were over 270 submissions to this competition. And we came in 5th place for the community awards, so the other developers in the competition got to vote for their favorite game. We came in 5th place, and then the judges gave us 6th place, and we were floored. We were blown away. We got a lot of really great positive feedback from people playing the game. We got featured on the GitHub blog. So we're kind of beside ourselves with this. Here's the submission page. You can find it on js13games.com. We got feedback from the judges. People left comments talking about it. I showed you the game. If you want to play it, I can send you a link later. If you want to talk about all the mechanics, or you really want to nerd out about stuff, you can talk to Brad or me. We'll talk your ears off. There's also the GitHub repo where you can look at it. I wrote a post-mortem for it. Talked about some design decisions I made. You can see the different, character designs. My son, Micah, helped me with the character design, so I want to thank him too, who's not here to hear the thanks. So I'm just talking about a game, and I wanted to kind of go over some lessons I've learned, which I said I'm totally qualified to talk about, having made 2 games. I think the first rule is you should create a consistent experience. Try to stick with a theme through the entire game, make it flow from the beginning to end. You really want to make the player, the guy playing or gal playing the game, feel like they're in the game. They want to feel invested in it. This isn't a hard rule. Maybe your theme is having multiple or eclectic themes. I guess kind of a way to show this with ONOFF is we chose to keep it super simple. One, because of size limitations, but also just that was the theme we wanted to do. So we picked 2 colors, and we stuck with that through the entire game. There were some character designs that you saw here where we had rounded corners on the character, and we decided, you know what, let's just keep everything square. It helped keep the code size down and helped keep things feel even simpler. And we wanted to have a really playful feeling and keep it fast-paced. The second thing I learned is experiment with ideas. We tried things that we thought would be really dumb, and they turned out to be really good. I can't think of anything offhand, but I know we did make those decisions. What are some crazy ways you can push your game in an interesting direction? One thing I did with this game is I got really tired of level design. Creating 25 levels with the same mechanic, you kind of burn out. And so I experimented with some random generated levels, just using code to randomly place platforms and spikes, which I didn't show you, but there are spikes in the game. You see them about halfway through. I started out by experimenting with just the toggle idea before getting Brad involved. I did a really dumb, simple prototype using Phaser.io, which is an HTML5 game engine. No graphics, just square blocks, just to test out the toggle mechanic. And it seemed really simple, and it is really simple, but it made the game really fun to play. So, even if your game mechanics seem overly or too simple, that's okay. Just go with it, and if it's fun to play, who cares? And one thing Brad wanted me to point out is that code-wise, we rolled our own engine, which turned out really easy and kept it light. There were options. There are tons of open source options out there. Phaser.io is one of them. There are some paid options. You can use game engines like Construct, which lets you write a game without knowing hardly any code. But we decided to roll our own engine because we wanted to learn new things, and it kept the code really light. Third rule, take something out of your game. And then after you do that, take another thing out of your game. There are lots of ideas that we had. Moving spikes, moving platforms, enemies. We thought about doing variations in gravity. I don't know if you're familiar with the game VVV. It's another really simple game, but you don't jump in the game. You just toggle your gravity, and that makes you either go up or down. And so you do platforming that way. But these are all things that maybe if we had more time, or if we wanted to make a more fully fledged game, we would implement some of these ideas. But for the sake of this, we took them out, and it made the game even more fun and more fast-paced. Fourth rule, and this is a very serious rule. Make your game easy to learn. It's very frustrating to learn to sit down and try to learn a mechanic that should be seemingly easy. And I watched my wife, who's out there, play this game for 30 minutes, and she was about ready to throw the laptop through the window in those 30 minutes. But she had a lot of fun trying to learn the mechanic. And if you notice, I made the first 3 levels, you know, teach you one mechanic at a time. The first level teaches you that, hey, you can jump. The second level teaches you, hey, I can toggle between platforms. And then the third mechanic was, hey, I can jump and toggle at the same time. I'm trying to do this with one hand, so I'm not going to do it. And those 3 levels were very deliberate. Those were the first levels I actually created when we got to making the game, because I know I didn't want to use text to teach the player how to play. I feel if you use text to teach the player how to play the game in a game that doesn't really have any text, it kind of breaks the immersion a little bit. And then you also sometimes run into language barriers if you've got people playing this in another country, which there were playing in another country. The 5th rule, make the game easy at first and then make it get harder as you go on. You don't want to start out with the hardest level in your game. It seems like a really simple rule and an obvious rule, but you'd be surprised how many games break this rule. Like I said already, I didn't introduce spikes until halfway through the game just because it really changed the way the game was played. And it was much, excuse the pun, but it really added a spike of difficulty to the game. Wow. This is another really important rule, and it's probably my favorite and most important rule. And I wish we had spent more time with this when we made the game. And luckily it turned out that the playtesters didn't have a lot of like super duper feedback of things we had to fix. But it's important to get people to playtest your game, because when you're building it and you're playing with the mechanics all the time, you get really good at the mechanic, and so it makes it seem really simple when it may not be simple. You'll get fresh perspectives. They'll find things that you might overlook. And another important thing is you want to get people who will spend more than 2 minutes playing it and will give you honest feedback. I know I had Latini and Danny do play testing, and I know they spent quite a bit of time with it, and I think Danny said his son even played it a little bit. Latini, as you can imagine, sent me a nice long paragraph of things to consider. And some of those things we fixed. For instance, the death counter. I originally had those, you can see it up here in the top left corner with the skull. I originally had that more pronounced. I wanted to make that be a bigger factor to the game, but he felt like it was a little punishing, or it felt like it was too in your face. So we scaled it back. We made it less of a thing. So I really do want to thank Latini and Danny, as well as my kids and Brad's kids and our wives for really doing a lot of play testing, and also for listening to that song loop over and over and over and over. And last of all, make your game fun to play. If it's not fun, no one's going to want to play it. I will say that this game, we made deaths cheap. We made them fast and fun and playful because it's kind of a big component to the game. So even though it's kind of frustrating, it's frustrating in a fun way. We found a lot of people on the submission page comparing their scores. Someone said they got to like 1,000 deaths by like level 20 or something, and they came back and they played it the next day. So I just had to update this, and I played it again, and I did it in 120 something deaths today. And so it was really cool to see people comparing scores. For the record, I have the high score of only 13 deaths. I dare you to challenge me. I think Brad's at like 27 or 23 or something like that. I've got a couple more notes here that I want to say about this, making it fun. Make deaths fun. Consider everything. When we were trying to make sure the game was fun, we thought of everything. We changed the music. I changed the music like 2 or 3 times, and I really procrastinated over it for a while, because for a while it just didn't have the right pace. It didn't have the right feeling, and it felt too like instead of fun. And like I said, it is frustrating to play, but that's part of the fun, the challenge. So try making a game. All you need is a good idea. Like I said, I started with the toggle idea, and that was all I needed. If you don't have certain skills, get people to help you. Again, thanks, Brad, for helping me with that. Thanks to the playtesters for helping me with that. There are a lot of resources on the internet. I've already mentioned Construct 3, which is a tool that lets you make games with very little coding. It's like $100, so there might even be a free trial. There are tons of open source gaming libraries. I mentioned Phaser.io. There's a lot of others. Phaser is probably one of the more popular ones. It's got a lot of examples out there. You don't even need to be a designer. There's opengameart.org, which has a ton of art that's free to use, ton of sound samples. ONOFF is using Tiny Music, which is a JavaScript sound library. I can talk to you about that if you want to catch me later. And it also uses it for sound effects. That's it. Thank you.